morning, Governor. This is Lauren James. Thanks for meeting today. Today, I'm going to brief you on the expected impacts from Hurricane Marco. I will provide the expected wind gust information, storm surge, county level evacuation recommendations, estimated evacuee numbers, and also a housing and sheltering plan. Hurricane Marco is forecast to make landfall near the Middle Keys and the Florida Keys, really near Duck Key, followed by a second landfall in Collier County near Naples and Marco Island as a strong Category 4 hurricane. The storm will then move inland as it weakens and move northeast across the peninsula, which will affect Henry and other central Florida counties and also northeast Florida. The greatest risk are to Monroe, Collier, Lee, Charlotte, and Central Florida counties, which will experience the strongest winds and storm surge. As you can see on the right, I have the image of the storm forecast track, and you can see how it visually curves as I just mentioned. So getting into the expected impacts of this storm, as I mentioned, Category 4. So in the Florida Keys, we are looking at sustained winds above 138 miles per hour with wind gusts exceeding 175 miles per hour. This is likely for catastrophic structural damage here in this region. And also in Southwest Florida, we are looking at sustained winds of 143 miles per hour with wind gusts up to 186 miles per hour. So widespread structural failures are expected. When we move to Central Florida, we're still looking at wind gusts between 110 and 135 miles per hour, which will cause prolonged power outages and structural damage to weak buildings. In Northeast Florida, we're looking at wind gusts ranging from 103 to 120 miles per hour. So minor structure damage here with some localized power outages likely. As we know, the most life-threatening hazard is storm surge. So looking at the Florida Keys, um, right now we're seeing 6 to 9 feet of storm surge in the upper Keys, 3 to 7 feet in the middle Keys. This is going to cause severe overwash along US 1 in on the southwest coast. 9 to 15 feet of storm surge is expected from Port Charlotte to the Everglades National Park region. As you see, that's a lot of red. Record flooding is very possible here in this scenario. When we look at the southeast coast, 1 to 3 feet of storm surge likely in Fort Lauderdale region, 3 to 6 feet in Miami, and 9 to 12 feet south of Miami near Homestead. So also, the St. Johns River Basin, we do want to keep an eye out on that. 3 to 6 feet of river storm surge may move inland, and that can affect some riverside communities. So based on the wind, the surge, and some past analytical data, we have come up with the recommendations for Hurricane Marco's evacuations. And we have some color-coded evacuation zones at the specific county level and some following slides. But overall here, as you see, Monroe County, we are expecting a full county-wide mandatory evacuation for the Florida Keys. All residents and visitors must move inland due to the impacts of this storm. Looking at Collier County, mandatory evacuation here as well. Evacuees should be moving 20 to 30 miles inland to shelters. In Lee County, also a mandatory evacuation for people in the surge-prone coastal areas and also the barrier islands. In Charlotte County, we also are requiring a mandatory evacuation for all communities near Charlotte's Harbor. Also listing some recommended evacuations that are voluntary, not necessarily mandatory, but highly recommended in Central Florida, Highlands, Orange County, Lake County. All it's very dangerous to be in a mobile home during this storm, so we want them to evacuate, and especially if you are in low-lying and flood-prone communities, highly recommend to evacuate here. And also in Miami-Dade County, there's a high concern for Cutler Bay, Homestead, and South Miami-Dade, as I just showed with all that red from the storm surge. Also, in Broward County, voluntary evacuation is recommended for people in the coastal region and in mobile homes as well here. So definitely want these people to move inland or into some neighboring counties if capacity is exceeded in the shelters. So specifically for Monroe County, all residents south of the 7 Mile Bridge should evacuate 100%, everyone. A full evacuation of the entire Florida Keys due to the infrastructure, the vulnerability here. There are some mainland shelters in Miami-Dade, Broward, or Palm Beach shall be good for evacuation here, looking at about 80,000 people evacuating from Monroe County. In Collier County, mandatory evacuations in zones A, B, and C, as shown here in the picture. You can see clearly the red, the orange, and the yellow. All of these areas are under mandatory evacuation to move that 20 to 30 miles inland, as I just mentioned, and recommending some inland shelters and also some out of the county shelters like Henry Glades and Highlands County, expecting about 320,000 people to be evacuating from Collier County. In Lee County, zones A, B, and C, and also the barrier islands are required to evacuate to the inland shelters and also can go to Charlotte, DeSoto, or Highlands County here as well. Estimated population to evacuate from Lee County is 425,000. In Charlotte County, zones A and B are required to evacuate in the barrier islands. So we just want the people in these regions that have the mandatory evacuations to find higher ground, go to elevated areas west of US 41, away from the Charlotte Harbor. We have some schools that are designated as public hardened shelters. That'll be a great option. Also, there's the Deep Creek area, which is east of I-75. It has higher inland evacuation neighborhoods. And also DeSoto, Highlands, Polk, and Glades County would be a better place to be than these Zone A, B, and Barrier Islands. So expecting about 100,000 people to evacuate from Charlotte County. So getting into the sheltering plan, we are expecting over 1 million people to be evacuating due to this storm. We are also recommending some long distance in-state sheltering if needed in North Florida. There's all type of shelter types throughout the state. As I mentioned, the hardened school facilities. We have sports complexes, faith-based shelters, state fairgrounds, and there's also some ADA compliant medical shelters for some medical needs, and also hotels and private facilities do offer sheltering. Also, there is transportation support for using evacuation buses for the major highways, and we do want to coordinate with the National Guard on this. The There's also options for out-of-state sheltering as well, of course, in Georgia and Alabama. So definitely want to mention that as well. So people that can flee the state can also do that if need be. So the major concerns here include the prolonged power outages, the isolation of the Keys due to the US 1 damage, and high search and rescue demand in Collier, Lee, and Charlotte counties. We recommend immediate mandatory evacuations for Monroe, Collier, Lee, and Charlotte counties with the voluntary evacuations elsewhere described. We do want to make sure that the shelter distribution spreads demand so that no region becomes overwhelmed. And we also want the special need shelters to be open early due to the expected power outages. This data used for this presentation comes from NOAA, the National Hurricane Center, FEMA slosh surge models, US Census population data, and also the ArcGIS track maps for this project.